Welcome to everyone. So this panel discussion, we hope to have some experts from the industry tell us about what is going on, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are in realizing what we believe is the future in terms of an intelligent and a connected future, right? As you know, in the present day, connectivity or communication has seen a huge change over the past several decades, and we are at a point where we find that it's now unthinkable to go back a few decades before as to how we are now. Okay? And in fact, it is the connectivity that we have has allowed us to go current scenario that we have, namely the pandemic, in a form where even though we have to maintain distancing to avoid getting infected, we find that the connectivity allows us to continue for the major part, for the majority of the work that we have been doing and continue to make progress. So this panel discussion, we have three experts from the industry with us, Mr. Sandeep Datta, Ms. Amrita Chaudhary, and Mr. Murali Sundaram. And I am Sundar from Rajalakshmi Institutions, along with the panelists, and just functioning as a moderator here. Okay. So now, before we start the session, let me introduce our panelists. So first, I'll introduce Mr. Sandeep Datta, panel member number one. Mr. Sandeep Datta is an innovator and a technology strategist with 20 years experience in IT across sales, pre-sales, and delivery, with work experience in several countries, including USA, UK, China, Hong Kong, and India. He is an experienced leader in digital transformation, Industry 4.0, IoT technologies, analytics, artificial intelligence, cloud, enterprise business solutions across manufacturing, automobile, CPG, and retail. He has led the launch of IoT division for IBM in India and set up the practice from inception, and prior to that, set up Watson for industrial sector in India. Currently, Mr. Sandeep Datta is working with IBM India Private Limited as IBM Watson IoT country head, India, South Asia, and is responsible for driving SAS sales, business outcomes, and values by bringing in innovative transformation solution in IoT plus advanced analytics like predictive, prescriptive, machine learning, Industry 4.0, blockchain, and cognitive analysis, including Watson and smart cities. Some of his key recent engagements include signing of largest ever TCV from IBM Watson IoT BU business unit across the world in 2019, valued at about 48 million overall for connected car solution, with the software valued at 19 million and TCV valued at about 2 million. He has received an award of excellence for signing Mega Cloud Deal of the Year, Maruti, and delivering exceptional business in 2019. Industry 4.0 connected manufacturing implementation 0.0 lab Suzuki and Honda India, connected tire for leading tire manufacturing in India, AR VR mobile applications with AI based recommendation for leading paints company in India, connected store and energy management for future growth. Prescriptive quality and shop floor productivity using video analytics for leading tire company in India, visual analytics for a leading solar company. In his earlier role as GBS Enterprise Head, North and East, he was instrumental in signing some large SAP implementation project for ACB India, Shyam Indus Triveni Earth Movers, Vedanta Group, Amrit Group, Kesoram Group, Vandana Global, and Monet Ispat, to name a few. He has filed patent with certification in Six Sigma Green Belt, IBM Blockchain Essentials, Big Data Foundations, in technical sales, IoT platform, IoT technical bootcamp, selling IoT, IBM selling profession certification, IBM Watson Data Platform Foundations, IoT optimize operations with AI, introduction to IBM IoT worker insights, Bluemix essentials. His key skills include sales, IoT, AI, Industry 4.0, pre-sales, channels and program management. Welcome, Mr. Sandeep. Now, let me introduce panel member 2, Ms. Amrita Chaudhary, Director Gala Smart Cities. Amrita Chaudhary is a co-founder of Gaia Smart Cities. It is Gaia, founder of Gaia, leads the business and marketing functions. Gaia provides solutions for smart cities, smart sites, blending IoT, ICT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and analytics to provide insights. Digital new age technologies and digital workflow automation to impact business processes and operation. Amrita is a business strategist, an engineer, and innovator, and she brings a unique understanding of business growth, technology, digital spaces, and brands. Previously, Amrita served as president and CEO of DY Works Future Group, country head South Asia for Harlequin, and associate director education for Harvard Business School for South Asia. Amrita provided board assessments and strategy consulting with A.T. Kearney in USA and OPS in Australia for clients in the mining, technology, automotive, professional services, and government sectors. She started a journey in innovation and product development with Applied Materials in California. Ms. Amrita holds 7 independent director of the board of Simmons Marshall, Nesco, and Mahindra Life Spaces Developers Limited, and on the board of Drishtant and Tech Startup for the social sector. Amrita holds degrees in BTech from IIT Kanpur, MS from UC Berkeley, and MBA from Carnegie Mellon Tepper Business School. She has raised funds for Asha for Education, co-founded and served as events director for TIE Melbourne, served on the education committee of Indian Merchant Chamber, the board of Deutsche Schule Bombay, and supports social causes related to education and health. Amrita is passionate about content, spoken, written, and visual. She has written 2 books of fiction and is a frequent commentator on business technology, marketing, and lifestyle issues in mainstream media, magazines, and electronic platforms. She's also been featured and interviewed for leading magazines, newspaper, and other media. Panel member 3 is Mr. Murali Sundaram. And Mr. Murali Sundaram has 25 plus years of experience in IT innovations and technologies that covers diversified experience in deep technology, architecture, design, development, delivery, compliance, regulation, and consulting. He is a technology enthusiast and has been an individual contributor, participated and developed several innovation programs with universities and corporate world. He has been technology advisor for several corporations, universities, startups, and government entities. He is a member of Global Technology Vision Team and had worked on technology radar for addressing a very broad brush of technologies needed for business, digital transformation for corporations. Murali Sundaram published Technology in Vision and document that focused on key trends in technology and leveraged social media as platform to post articles to provide necessary technology nudge to the professionals. He does this on a periodical basis to capture trends and come up with both strategic and tactical approaches for practices. He has enabled emerging technologies and technology advice as a service, Internet of Things, chatbots, wearable computing, VR, AR adoption, and 3D printing. Integrating vendor solutions with practice solution and integrating vendor solutions with practice solution. He has led technology modernization initiatives with key focus on emerging technologies and disruptive innovation with colleges and universities. He is actively evangelizing disruptive and innovative trends in conferences, workshops, and professional forums, and is also blogging about it. His specialties include design thinking, smart cities, speed geeking, crowdsourcing, disruptive innovations, cloud computing, blockchain, wearable computing, Internet of Things, chatbots, VR, AR, 3D printing, crowdfunding, and startup workshop. Welcome to our panel members. And the way we will go through this panel discussion is we'll allow about short time, say about 10 to 15 minutes for each of the panel members to present their ideas and views initially. And then we can go around with probably a round of questions. And then we can take it in a free form as needed based on the questions that come up. Thank you. Now, may I request our first panel member, Mr. Sandeep Datta, to articulate his thoughts and views.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Sundar. I think that was quite a elaborate description of the work that I did in my career, spanning almost now 21 years. Yeah, I think the core forum that we are having today is basically more around an intelligent, connected world. Right? I hope I am audible clearly, right?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir, we're audible. No problem. Please go ahead.
Okay, great, sure. Thanks. Yeah. So as I was saying, right. So we are, the core point that we are trying to discuss today is around, a connected world, and that's where we are living in. And I think the biggest example is the way we are all connected today, right? I know over a virtual platform where I think right now I can see there are some almost 80 members. We are virtually collaborating, discussing, sharing ideas, kind of thing, right? And that's the biggest example of of a connected world, right? And this is not only about this collaboration only in the in this space, but we are seeing for the last many years with the advent of technologies across every industry that we can look at, right? And the prime thing what is basically the the advent of this the base that comes in, right, is basically, and one of the topics that I saw is around 5G that we were putting as part of here, which is I think is very, very important kind of thing, right? Because as we are discussing here, I can see that only maybe the panelists and the host are allowed to run a video, right? I think I can see nobody else is doing. The primary reason maybe that we are trying to see that the bandwidth does not get clogged, right? And we are able to hear clearly. That means there is some scope of improvement, and that's where I think where 5G will be fitting in, kind of thing, very much, right? Where it can at least promises that it will be like we can have a download speed of 100 GBs per second, kind of thing, with very, very low latency, right? And that's that's these are the things that sets the backbone of some of the innovations that we are seeing or will be coming in, kind of thing. And if we look at all these connected worlds are the cellular networks actually have changed our lives throughout that, and has played hand in hand in terms of making sure that these technologies touches our lives. So if I start with, for example, 1G kind of thing, right? When it started, right? So that actually helped us calling each other, kind of thing, over a cellular phone, right? But previously, before 1G, at least used to have a normal phone at home, kind of thing, and I can call you only when you are at home, kind of thing, or vice versa, right? So that's what the technology provided, that even if I am mobile, I'm outside, I can still call you, right? The next is basically what came in as 2G, where we were able to text each other besides calling each other as well. And that's again a big paradigm shift that we saw. And I think that's, I can say more of a mother of what is the social media platform that we are seeing, right? Where I can exchange by writing. That concept, I think, was set by, something called 2G, where we are able to send, maybe we started with sending SMS kind of thing to each other. If we look at, then, came the 3G kind of thing, which brought in more and more applications on that, right? Whether And I do know it was very exciting to see your emails right on your phone, or like you were able to move from one place to another using something like a GPS kind of a thing, right? And also the advents of various other applications that we saw, like the social media platforms and all those things, right? And and with the advent of 4G, I think it was more about all these OTT platforms, streamings, videos, and all these things that we are where in the current situation that we are in, right? But I think still we see that there is an issue still on speed, on latencies, right? And which are still prohibiting some of the next step, if I put it right. For example, if I have to come out with something like a driverless car, all right? I cannot have a situation where, that because of latency, right, I face an accident, right? So while the technology is ready, right, in terms of, providing that feature of, of a driverless car, but it needs to be supported by this backbone of 5G. Otherwise, by just running a machine learning program or a visual analytics, all those things are there already, right? But I think that goes very, very important kind of, not same thing if I look at on the augmented reality or on the virtual reality world, right? If I have to do something like a remote surgery on a patient, right? So that's the, technologically it is possible, but the challenge is still that is the network supporting that? I cannot, a surgeon cannot be standing with a scalpel in hand and waiting for the signal to appear, right? So you need a almost a very, very negligible latency so that it should happen real time kind of, right? So I think so all these things are coming up together as we speak, right? And it's coming up together not only across the world, but very much in India as well. As I think you mentioned some of the things as part of my resume, but I have been working with some of the leading car companies in India, like Maruti Suzuki, Honda, in terms of launching their connected car solutions, right? So that and going forward, starting from 2021, right? Every car that goes out of the stable for Maruti, right, we'll have a connected car solution, factory fitted kind of, right? So you won't have a choice that whether you need or don't need, right? It comes by default, right? The same thing is being adopted by Honda and and every other makers kind of thing. And even now some of the people who are maybe I would say late adopters kind of thing, like for example Toyota, who thought that maybe let's wait and watch. Now they are saying that people may not buy Toyota if they don't bring out that feature, right? So now they have also started being into that bandwagon kind of thing, right? So I think so that's where the world we are moving into, and I would leave it at that, with that thought for now, and let other hear from other panelists also on this, and then we can take forward the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep. I did notice that you touched upon connected cars, but maybe in a later round, I would like you to elaborate on what is the main aspect of this connectivity that is being focused upon in the industry, particularly for in the automobile sector.
Sure.
And the connected car sector would be a good point for people to understand what the challenges are and what is being overcome. Yeah. Thanks for providing the details about how this progression has enabled a progression in technology, particularly the connectivity technology, from a 1G to where we are now, namely a 4G as an incumbent, as an available solution, a ready solution, a ubiquitous solution, and moving forward, looking at 5G as a game changer, providing a much higher bandwidth with a very low latency solution. Thank you once again, and we'll come back to you for that some of the more details in the next round. And now I request Ms. Amrita Chaudhary to say her views and her thoughts on what's happening and what's happening within her company, as well as how she perceives the technology advancement in this connected future.
Thank you so much, Professor. First, I'd like to echo what Mr. Datta said, that as a practitioner, the biggest challenge that we find on the field are really related to network, related to power, related to the harsh environments that we have in India, which are very different from how connected systems can work in global markets, right? So we have some very unique challenges here. Now, to set the stage, actually, if I could, I'd like to share some screens, and then I'll quickly walk you through those, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think you can turn your presentation on and do it. Not a problem.
Yes. Okay. Hopefully, you're seeing my screen, right?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So, talk to you a little bit about IoT and all the related technologies that go along with it, which includes AI, ML, analytics, insights, and how it's been evolving over the last few years, right? So if we look at the world around us, the world itself, is sentient, in the sense that there is a lot of information that is there in the world around us. The question is how do we gather that insight from the city, from buildings and infrastructure, from the people who occupy and work in these spaces or run the operations of these spaces. How do we collect that information, right? So I'll talk to you on two streams. One is quickly on the city side. On the city side, if you see cities started out with looking at sensor-based technologies in pockets, which then soon started being connected nationally. So for example, in India, if I give you the examples of UP Dial 100, or many cities have safety and surveillance systems now, right? So they have CCTV cameras which are looking at not just traffic violations but safety issues as well, right? Is there somebody who is unauthorized, a perpetrator, somebody who's in the area? Now, if you connect many of these systems, then you get a statewide or a nationwide information. If you connect all of these systems across countries, then you get a much more interconnected system where you're able to track safety and security, for example, because that comes to mind most. Many of you would have seen what happened in let's say a Boston bombing scenario several years back, a few years back, or what happens anytime there is a something which is a threat to national security in any country, right? There is a lot of interconnected devices in each city, and there is a level of data sharing and interconnectivity at one level, which enables the cities and governments to look at these look at data, look at analysis, look at correlations, and identify the root cause or identify challenges. And a very similar thing has been happening in a different way in the enterprise segment. So when we started, when Gaia started, and also as when many other companies in the IoT space started several years back, we were looking at standalone IoT applications. It was okay enough to understand what was happening at the last mile, at a site, at an equipment level, get the information digitally onto the cloud, and understand a performance. Then the next stage was that it needed really to be linked with the enterprise system. So it needed to be connected to the ERP or the CRM, and so that there was a little bit more of a deeper level understanding of what this data meant when it interacted with the processes of the company. Then people started realizing that just IoT and sensor information is not enough. In fact, if you look at people talking about the data that companies typically capture, There have been Gartner reports and SAS reports that say that as much as 90% of the data that exists in a company is not used. Right? It is just data is captured, but it is not put to use. So clearly there are many other streams of data, whether it is operational data, customer data, ecosystem data that a company is capturing. And when you blend this IoT data with digital data, which is captured by the users who are running the spaces or running the operations, and the enterprise data that already exists, there's a lot more there's richer analytics that can happen, right? There is better decision making that can be done because you're looking not just at a standalone IoT data from a particular system, but you're correlating it with many other data points that exist, right? And then finally, you have, and since connected cars was mentioned by Mr. Datta, if you look at a connected car scenario, you're looking at IoT and digital data streams, not just from your car, but from many other players in the ecosystem, right? So if you look at a car that is moving and through the toll roads, that car is at the toll booth, it is accessing Vahan data. It might be accessing a payment gateway. It accesses a bank or a credit card wallet to make the transaction. So there are many systems which are within the company and outside the company in the ecosystem that get touched as this particular process happens. So this really is how it has evolved. So if we see what are the important things over here, what are the data streams? Obviously, you have data from assets. By asset, I mean equipment, by the site itself. There is data that is captured from the process as it's happening. And then there is a lot of information about people, the people who are working in that space, where they are, attendance, location, presence, real-time location tracking, their processes, the quality of work that is being done. So there's a lot more people-led data that can also come in. The data streams can be IoT. There's multiple ways in which digital data comes in. And of course, since we talked about AR, VR, so there's a lot of audio-visual ways, in which either voice or vision data gets captured. Right? The acquisition of the data can be in a standalone system, or it can be in a system that interconnects with multiple other systems. And then there is the fusion of data needs to happen, right? Because you're getting data from many different sources, and the richer the data, the deeper the insights, but that also means that there is a process of cleansing, correlating, deduping. There is a lot of ensuring that the dark data gets captured, but it gets correlated with the other transaction or ambient data that is there in the system. Once the data is there, then comes the whole idea of analytics, right? And there's a lot of optimization algorithms, factorization, prioritization, allocation, multiple different kinds of algorithms that need to be done so that you take the data and you're able to make real-time decisions that help either the company, the enterprise, its users, or the city and its citizens, right? So there's no use or purpose to data if it's lying in a database and if you continue to refer to it once a month or once a quarter, right? Data needs to be real time. And since it's being captured real time, the analysis also needs to be in stream and live and near real time as possible. And then finally, there is this notion of data as a service, because the whole idea in these scenarios is that the data is giving you currency. There is a value to this data, and the quicker you analyze it and you use it in stream to make decisions, the better it becomes for you. So there's a continuous stream of data, and it's important to ensure that it remains such. So if we look at a few different ways in which this is happening. So one is that there's a lot of there's an emergence of what we call civic technologies, especially in the smart city scenario. So you're looking at IoT and data for addressing what is called the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which is essentially the 16 areas in which our human life gets impacted. Things like education, water, there's 16 areas so all of these are touched in different ways by different solutions, which are looking at wastewater monitoring, like, they're looking at like, the educational health indicators, and making these government to citizen kind of solutions so that you can monitor both the delivery of the services, but also the impact of that solution itself, like, that whether it's working, and the efficacy of government spending and so on can be monitored. This is an area where we do have, like, as Gaia, we do have some solutions, because we do work in the area of like, government and smart cities. Then the other area where IoT and data as a service comes into play is for governance. And especially, like, in an organization or a city, like, you have multiple third parties who are performing many different parts of the service or the operations. And it becomes important to have ways and means, technological ways and means, to see how the work is happening, and whether the contracts and service levels are being met, and whether the experience that is being delivered to the clients is, like, what they need. So if you look at, like, any kind of a service industry, like, whether it is retail or hospitality or airports and transportation, there is some element of this user experience or customer experience that comes in, and building that, like, and taking it back to the processes, the assets, the site, and like, creating a fully baked system which considers, like, the contractual agreements and the service level agreements, enables companies to monitor the last mile, right? And again, like, like, this is an area where we are working with multiple clients, where at a national level, at a head quarter level, you need to know what is happening in different regions, what is happening at the state level, what is happening within a city at different locations, what is the performance, what is the like, experience, what is the site condition, asset condition, and, like, roll up the data, like, and drill down in many different ways so that you can optimize the performance. Right? There's a couple of, like, new technologies that obviously everybody is talking about. So we talk a lot about intelligence in the cloud, and which means that you bring the data to the cloud, and there is a lot of analysis and dissection and like, reporting that happens from the cloud layer itself. But increasingly, what we are talking about is the intelligent edge, which means that your edge devices, and like, at one level, like, your POS terminal is an edge device, but a connected car is an edge device, like, like, we have a lot of, like, these intelligent cloud connected white goods now, or durables, or, like, building like, equipment. These are all intelligent edge devices. So the whole idea is that given network connectivity, given the like, concerns about both data lag and latency, that there is a delay, or some like, data actually, like, packets get dropped, and privacy concerns, right? It's important to have a blend of the edge and the cloud, so that some information gets processed at the edge itself, at the edge device itself, and then what gets transmitted over the network, like, consuming bandwidth, is a limited fraction of the data that got captured. Right? So this intelligent edge is becoming extremely important. And then, like, with the edge comes the mesh, which means that you have multiple edge devices which are connected together. And I think, like, I mentioned in the context of connected cars, but also if you look at like, restaurants, or, like, hospitality, like, there are many, many different areas where you need multiple different systems and multiple intelligent edge devices to connect with each other and speak to each other, right? And as digital payments come into play, there will be a lot more of this happening across many sectors. So we've talked about IoT devices primarily as like, sensors which are measuring information, and these sensors can be anything from, like, temperature, humidity, like, it could be footfall, how many people are coming in and out of an area, the density. Right now, everybody is concerned about, like, the density of occupation of a space. So all of these things are important. But there are many other ways in which we can interact with IoT devices. You can, like, there are touch screen devices where you can, like, feed in data through that. And increasingly, like, there is voice technologies on the edge which are coming to play. we all know of voice on the cloud, such as Alexa and Siri. But again, given the whole idea of latency and lag, it's important that some information, like, gets processed at the edge device level itself. And again, we have, like, at Gaia, some really fantastic innovation that's happening on voice machine learning on the edge, so that, like, we can look at contactless devices on the edge. And finally, I think, like, as engineers, we worry about core functionality, but at the end of the day, the functionality needs to be used by people. And these are people, like, they are consumers, they are citizens, they are users. So the interface to that system or the interface to that device needs to have a layer of design in it. It needs to be contextual. It needs to be like, the information that is brought up to me as a customer might be very different from the information that needs to be brought up to you as a customer. So this whole idea of mass customization of, like, interactive and enriched screens and product interfaces are extremely important, so that adoption is high. Technology is fantastic, but the reason why many things fail is because of change management, because people don't adopt it. And one way of improving adoption and improving, usage is to design things better. The look and feel of it should be better, as good as the functionality, right? Like, that's the reason why we like Apple devices so much, because its form and function both come together. Right? So if you look at, the innovation, there are many aspects of it. We talked about communication, there's sensors, there's embedded devices. So there is the edge analytics that happens at the embedded device level itself. There's the app and the platform, which is communicating with the device, bringing the data. There's analytics, which can happen at the cloud level, at the edge level. And finally, there are the interfaces, right? And lastly, there are some larger questions, there is a whole area of ethics, of open source data, shareability, interoperability, and what are the rules that that govern this. And obviously, these are things that all of us need to consider. Data protection is very important, because every client and every user wants their data to be protected, but there are many other issues beyond that as well. Right? So hopefully in our conversation, we can talk about a lot more of these.
Thank you, Amrita. It was a good, presentation was good. Thank you. I think you gave a good highlight to various aspects of how to handle this scaling of the solution, starting from simple IoT systems to evolving it to the enterprise, and then taking it to the city and, in fact, the world level. Okay, I think you've highlighted several points here, and they are, I think it does throw up a lot of challenges as I see. And your point about ethics is, I think, a very, very valid point. Now, with the proliferation of data, that becomes the bigger issue in terms of how do we handle this data? How do we see to it that the data that we are trying to send somewhere has been filtered in a form where it's no longer going to cause a problem for the person sending the data? I think those are, a big issue that need to be addressed. And in fact, one question that I myself had is, how does one handle this, continuous stream of data that's coming? A system is configured. Most of it is going to be based on the real-time part of the data. What happens to the data afterwards? Do you just dump it, or do we, like we used to have what we call the byte bucket, right? In the context earlier. It just goes somewhere. Don't worry about where it goes. Or is it something that we need to save, store for the future for a different reason? See, one of the aspects of an intelligent, or bringing an intelligence to a system, is try to see how we learn. So having configured a system, if we don't have it in the learning framework, then we are stuck with the fact that it works now, but we are not sure whether it's been made future-proof. So some thoughts on these, if you can highlight in a later part in your presentation, in the second round, that'll be good. That's from my own side, but then we'll have other questions coming up from the audience later. Thank you once again. And now we move on to Mr. Murali Sundaram. Mr. Murali Sundaram, the floor is yours. You have to unmute yourself, sir.
Yes, I did that. So thank you. the challenge with going on the last is, most of the things that I wanted to say is probably covered by the distinguished panelist earlier. Are you able to hear me well? Is there any delay?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Please go.
Okay, okay. So let me focus on the title or the spirit of what we had the title on, and then focus more on how do we manage to do, how can we manage to do more? Everybody is aspiring to do more. So the spirit is on the connectivity. For the connectivity, you need to have capability, the bandwidth, and a distinguishing feature that you want to do an exchange with someone. And this distinguishing feature could come from the technology or one of your capabilities. Now let's look at the technology landscape even, right? So if you look at it, it has a fundamental technology components and it has applied technology. It's from a scientific thinking that you have, right? So fundamental is looking at the user interfaces. We will come to the user interface in a while. And we have the middle part, which is, which is largely influenced by the machine learning and its component. And the back-end part, which is the compute capability itself, that is going in the direction of something like quantum computing, which is not a flying cars anymore. It is possible now. So it gives you unlimited compute capabilities, unlimited storage, in a sense, unlimited bandwidth. So the problem turns around and say, what are the kind of problems you want to solve? It's not anymore like, can I solve a particular research problem? Can I take on some of the wicked problems, the environmental, it would say? Can I take on some of the NP hard problem? Can I make it NP easy? Those kind of questions can be addressed in that. So we looked at the fundamental technology part, and then we look at the applied part. There are several applied parts. Vertical industries are looking at it. Several people are looking at it, right? The one that I wanted to bring attention is in some area called microbiome. It's an emerging medical field. It tries to understand the microbiome species in our body. The understanding it will completely change our medicinal practices, our understanding about what is disease and what is not disease, and some of the autoimmune diseases that have been hitting the humanity very hard. So some of those problems, do we have the solution at the horizon? We are able to answer some of those questions, right? That is the first applied technology I want to say a few words on. The second is the space technology. We have been looking at mostly on the ground level, and recently we had a special startup program with IIT on space technology, the launching, the fuel, the monitoring, and anything that you could do in the space itself. Can you have some innovations around that? It's something interesting to look at, right? We want to employ, if not 7.2 billion people, at least 1/3 of them. Is there enough work in the planet to make it happen? You may not have a job, but you will have a lot of work to do, right? So the space technology is another interesting area. And a combination of the micro level computational technologies connected with the central one, which is strongly influenced by the drones. There are several technologies you can pick up. I am picking up drones. I'm not looking at something like 3D printing, which is gaining a lot more popularity. But in terms of our limited discussion, right? So I'll say probably 25 words or less on each of them, and then I'll probably stop at that for the continued discussion. It is grossly closing the digital divide. The people need not be educated at all. It is getting classified into the area called people literate technology. You don't have to train people in technology. Instead, technology turns itself and then is able to adapt itself to serve the people. So that disruption is already happening in the voice area. Very good one to watch and close. And a lot of people can contribute to that. In each of the area that I had been talking, in each of the area, it's an opportunity for student, researchers, innovation, disruptive companies to adapt, apply it in various vertical industries, and so on and so forth. Machine learning, I don't have to say any word, right? 5 years back, most of the people will have to answer, if you're not gone to cloud, why haven't you gone to cloud? But nowadays, the question is, if you're not adapted machine learning, why haven't you done that? From the sensors viewpoint, from the business viewpoint, even from something known as the GAN, Generative Adversarial Network, for analyzing either fake one or create a fake one. Either way you can look at it, right? Some very interesting developments are happening there. MIT's GPT-3 language. If you have requirement, you can get it, right? If there's no need for coding, no code systems are coming up. Very important one as well, right? And then finally, when you come to quantum computing, most of the people may be familiar with fundamentals. Instead of the 0, 1, you can go up to 17-bit, and it enhances parallel computing. And some of the problems you thought you were not able to solve previously, you can solve now. Something like weather forecasting, market predictions, and things like that. So these fundamental technologies are moving at the speed or even faster than the speed of the business, you could say, right? Now, let's switch to the fundamental side. Microbiome, our body has more than 8 billion microbes. Right? Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Our understanding of all the bacteria that are bad is dramatically changing in the last 10 years. Right? Some diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's is all related to microbiome. It's related to your gut bacteria and your brain connection is there. There are a lot of studies going on in that. So in that, they are analyzing your RNA-16S, heavily computational. You need to understand your microbiome spread or species spread. By that, you will be able to predict what is the food that is good for you. If you have a disease, do you have a cure? It's not a small, medium, large kind of prescription, or you are trying to solve or fix a particular body part. It's not you are trying to fix a heart or your kidney or liver. It's more like, is the treatment good for you? In future, you can imagine a surgery in which your microbiome sample may be taken and you have to create that environment rather than having a pure sanitary environment, because that may affect your immunity in a very dramatic way. So a lot of good things are happening there, right? Space is unprecedented. There are people who thought they can mine out of the asteroid. There was a startup, and then somebody saw a business sense in it. They even bought that, right? So from the launching perspective, from the navigation perspective, from monitoring perspective, from your ability to watch the Earth from space perspective, there are a lot of possibilities that are there. Drones application, I don't know how to say that, from the ground level activities or mapping that you could do in the industry, all the way up to aerial surveillance or helping in the insurance for assessment. The opportunities are plenty over there. So I think, from the fundamental perspective and from the application perspective, there's a lot more work to be done. And, I think, we don't have to worry about, will I have a job or something like that. I think, there's a lot more design work, a lot more innovation work, a lot more application work that are available. I have an approach for, how to manage our learning of these multiple technologies together. I'll probably take it during the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murali. I think that was a good view about various other aspects of requirement that need to be considered with the technology assisting and enabling there's various schemas, particularly from a health perspective that you touched upon, and the importance of compute requirements. I think that is a very important requirement. Namely, yes, technology has to go hand in hand for us to be able to achieve what we want to do. And we are talking about 5G. Yes, we are bringing in a lot more connectivity. Up to some point, technology was mainly focused on what needs to be done for the current requirement. I think now we are, as you rightly said, the way the technology is expanding, we'll have to ensure that whatever compute facility that we can harness, we have to see how to enable it, how to get it to be in a low power form, and maybe have a biocompute systems as the way to achieve low power and high compute requirements taken care of, and look at various requirements. I think your point about space applications and this microbiomes is a very important one, because on the one side we have to see how to expand, and as such all over the globe, I think exploring space has become one of the key aspects, probably because at some point people are wondering, have we plundered our earth so much that we may not be able to sustain ourselves here, and so look for other opportunities elsewhere, maybe other space that we have to, other places that we have to go to. Whatever it is, I think space again has taken off in a way where we are seeing a lot of good, you might say, work going on, and within the reach of the common man to some extent is what is being attempted in very many different domains. And so with that, I think thank you once again, sir. And now we'll probably look for first maybe questions from the audience. Let me see if there are any questions. I think they may post the questions either verbally or in the chat window. So give me a moment. Let me look at it. I would request the audience to pose any questions as a message in the chat window, and then we can move forward. I'll just wait for a minute or so to see if some specific questions are coming in. If not, I'll again go around one more round with our panelists. Okay. I don't see any messages coming in. They have posted a message to everybody to post their questions in the chat window, but I'm not seeing any questions come up so far. So in the meantime, let's go for another round, and I request Mr. Sandeep to probably just take up one question that I had asked him, and any other point that you would like to add based on whatever our other panelists have talked about and made as points. Please go ahead, Mr. Sandeep.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think one thing which you wanted me to touch upon is basically on the connected car solutions, right? And I think it's a very interesting space, okay? And I think we are all in some way touched by it. If you are using Uber, Ola, right, or all these car sharing app, you can say these are all various forms of connected car solutions in itself, right? But when we talk of a connected car solution, it is basically how I can make those physical objects, which is the car, also connected, right? So any car that you have basically post 1996, right? So there is a port that is available below the steering wheel, which is called the OBD2 port, right? So there are a lot of devices that are available where you can plug in, a dongle, right, onto that OBD2 port, through which actually you can start pulling out the data from those cars. right? So there is a plethora of startups that has actually started getting into that space in India, right? Where, like they're getting those things into these, into your cars, and it can be of any make, model, doesn't matter, right? So they can just put in that, and you can actually get a connected car solutions kind of thing. And there are various players in the market who actually are looking at a share of that pie. Okay, so not only the one of the major players definitely is the auto OEMs, right? And they don't want to, definitely they're not fascinated by you plugging in your, a solution from the market and putting it into a Honda car or a Maruti car. So the solutions that they're coming in are more into factory fitted, which goes into their CAN bus or their ECU, okay? Because the problem that you have with, an external solutions, like, like which is like goes like a pen drive, right? That I can change, these dongles from one card to another, right? So the whole solution then goes for a toss kind of thing, right? So besides the auto OEMs who are looking for a share of that, that market, which we call as the connected market, there are a whole set of other players. Like we are now seeing a lot of auto ancillary companies, like for example, the battery manufacturers, the tire companies, right? So they are also very interested in getting into these connected car solutions, right? Especially with the electric vehicles, EV coming in, right? So that's where the health of the battery is very important for them. So they are also looking at can we get into that space, right? Besides that, the insurance companies are very interested also, right? So like already companies like Bajaj have already launched a solution in the market where it is like pay how you drive kind of thing. So if you are a good driver, right, you drive well kind of thing, maybe I can give you a better premium offer next year. All right. So that means basically overall, I am, trying to minimize my risk exposure by ensuring that you drive better. At the same time, I'm passing on some benefits to you, right? And that is creating a differentiator for me in the market vis-a-vis my competitions, right? The telecoms are very interested, like, all the telecom companies, like, we talk to Airtel, Vodafone, Jio, everybody wants to or working on into getting into this connected car space very much. The logistics company, they are already, large logistics company have already launched, something like a connected car solution of their own where they can manage, for example, you have suppose 100 trucks or 1,000 trucks kind of thing. How, now with the Amazon experience that we have, right? That where, as soon as you buy, immediately, when the things will get delivered, right? And as we say, like we try to carry forward an experience from one to another, right? Now, anybody who does not give me an Amazon kind of experience, I always feel, something is missing, right? So now the market is demanding, or the customer is demanding that from every sector that I need an Amazon kind of service, that if I am saying that I order a good from there to Delhi to Calcutta, I need to know where it is, where it is lying, is it traveling, when it is reaching, at what time it's reaching. It cannot just say that, okay, I will let you know when it comes, kind of thing, right? So even, the governments are very interested, especially, in the smart city space. That is one of the, things there. So I think this is a very interesting area that it is developing in, and especially we are getting a lot into more of driver insights kind of thing, where we are doing a lot of analytics, for example, on the driver behavioral side, right? That how you are actually driving, behind the wheels, because as we know, every minute we have, we lost almost 4 people in India due to accidents. All right. So how I can, once I have this connected car solutions, I can actually know, how you are driving, where you are driving, at what speed you are driving, right? And even I can know that by your driving pattern, right? That whether you are a rookie or you are an experienced driver, because many times we have seen that, like a helper driving instead of a driver driving, right? So those kind of things also with this analytics, we can very well catch kind of thing, right? So then, we are looking at various kinds of, vehicle insights also, right? In terms of, we call it as autonomous driver assistance systems, ADAS, right? So a lot of, we cannot come out, as I said, right, with a fully a driverless as of now in the market, primarily because I think, unless we have a backbone like 5G, which is available everywhere in the world, or at least in India, uninterrupted, right? Because the challenge that you always ask is that, am I going to have a connectivity? Always, right? So unless that is guaranteed, the infrastructure is not there, right? So you cannot have this technology platform running, right? So that's where, when we are talking of these connected car solutions, right now the way it is made is that it can very well run on even on a 2G platform or a 3G platform. You don't even need a 4G, right? So that's basically why, the adoption is so huge kind of thing. And, and the primary thing what we are trying to look at is how do I, develop use cases which are very, very, India specific kind of, right? Because it is not like what is, workable in US or Europe, right? That problem statement does not work in India, right? For example, in US, where you are parking in a car in a very big area, maybe finding your car can be a use case, right? But in India, if I give you a feature of, okay, in your mobile, I can tell you where your car is, and for that you have to pay me 100 rupees every month, right? You will say, sorry, maybe after 2 months we will not pay because there is no value there, all right? So that's very important, that how do I, make it more for the market. So I give you some examples of, of India specific use cases, right? So it's a very, if you look at, we always, and it has happened with me, I'm sure it has happened with many of others also. So like here, we many times use a chauffeur driven car, right? And many times it happens that after, they drop you in your office or schools or colleges, right? You will see that they are parking their cars in the parking area, and he is sleeping there with an AC on, right? Or, so that's, option one. Or after dropping you, he's trying to take, do some, free rides or ride sharing kind of thing, right? To get some additional money, right? All at your cost, right? So if I can say that, I can give you an alert, right? Where, you get an alert on your phone that, what, your car is stationary, right? But the AC is running for the last 5 minutes, right? That's a value to you, right? And if I for that value, if I ask you that you have to pay me something, you would be more than happy to do that, right? So those are the, very, very India specific use cases that we try to do, right? Where, we do a lot of, looking at the personas, right? Where, like who are the buyers, right? For example, is it a working woman? Is it a, right? So what is the target segment, and what are the problems that target segment faces? And with that thing, can I, provide a solution, right? So that's what catches basically, the attention, or, and that way I can get a wallet share of my customer, because most of these connected car solutions, you need to subscribe, you need to pay money, and we are in Indians love to have everything free, right? Like, Google and others have, or, all this social media have, made us feel like, everything is free kind of thing. So anything that I have asked that I need to pay, right? I know the very important is that, can I really show you the value there, right? So that's the key thing which I think we are trying to solve as we are going with all these auto OEMs in India. So that's why I just wanted to share my perspective on this.
Thank you. Thanks for those clarifications. There are a couple of questions from the audience. One is a safety aspect in connected cars. Could you comment on that?
Yeah. So On the safety aspect, there are two things. Okay, I'm not sure. Are you looking at safety from the vehicle side or from the occupier side kind of thing, right? So what we are trying to do is that from the safety side, we are looking at are your, is your seat belt on kind of thing, right? So if I don't see that, you are driving and your seat belt is on, now, like your mobile, right? So this is basically a two-way kind of thing, right? Right now, if you look at, if you are, there is an alarm that automatically goes in, right? It's a very default feature. For example, if you are driving Toyota and this kind of cars, even for the front row passenger also. So that's default, right? Now, many times what the driver does is that they just plug it in behind and sit on top of that, right? So we always know how to, buckle that systems kind of thing, right? So that's something which we are trying to avoid kind of thing with this technology. The second thing is that, if I face with an accident, right? And many times what happens is that, like we call it as the golden hour kind of thing, right? So basically where, if I face with an accident, how soon can, an intimation go to a hospital, to an insurance company, so that, or to my family members, right? So that, something can be arranged if it's a very severe kind of an accident, right? So those are some of the things that are, more being provided as a feature from the connected car solutions kind of thing, right? The other aspect is that whether, connected car, the other way I can look at the same question is that, is it making my car vulnerable to, security breaches, right? I don't know which area, so that's another area, right? And so.
Okay. Thank you. May I request Ms. Amrita, can you go ahead and for your second round, maybe answer one question? There are a few other questions. I'll pose them after your comments and statements. Okay, please. You will have to unmute yourself, please.
Thanks. I think you had asked about data, right? And how long do we store it, right? So, see, there are two thoughts on it, right? Like, there is some data which, has short-lived importance in the sense that, it really needs to trigger some alert in the moment to, trigger a workflow or trigger an operation which needs to be done now. But there is a certain amount of intelligence that gets captured over time, and especially if we look at predictive analysis of any kind, right? If we have to train any AI algorithms on prediction, on optimization, on for diagnostics and detection, and scenarios like that, you need data sets which are going back, historical data sets, so that you understand how the system behaves in different scenarios, so that you can predict the future, right? The richer the data that you store from the historical data that you store, the richer can be your the predictive ability for the future, right? The AI model is richer because it understands the different ways in which the system, the process, the system, the company, the people behave under different scenarios, different triggers. And it's not possible to fully understand and create very deterministic models of what might happen, right? So when you're looking at creating self-learning systems which are on a loop storing some information and storing some intelligence, then you do need a certain amount of back data that is captured. The question is how much, right? How much? And frankly, there is a lot more data that we capture and which is not needed. You don't know what data is needed and what data is not needed, right? So that is part of the problem, what to discard and what not to discard. And then there is the cost of data storage, right, which is exponential. So really it is a matter of understanding, okay, what is if there are 4 or 5 outcomes that I need to derive, right? I might be capturing, let's say 50 parameters. I might be capturing streaming data every minute. So, that's where you would take a call on saying okay, what data do I discard? At what frequency do I discard? right? If I'm like, looking at faults, then like, do I keep the trail of that like fault data so that I'm able to diagnose it better. But if it's data which was good data, really, like when you're saying that there is no fault, there is no event, there is no trigger, there is no breach, then that data is really not giving you intelligence into what can happen in different scenarios, right? So there is a certain element of the normal data that you can definitely discard. I mean, the same thing actually applies even in the government domain, right? So if you're looking at your challan systems and your vehicle tickets that we all get, that can be kept for a few months. It can be kept for a year to know my driving record, for example. But beyond that, it really doesn't serve any purpose. But if we are looking at the movement of what is called person of interest or property of interest, once somebody or something is tagged as interest from a terror or safety perspective, then it's important to store that data for a much longer period of time, right? Because you don't know when or where such data may emerge again, and when, how far do you need to go, or geographically how wide do you need to go to make your correlations, right? So you need to store that. I mean, the government is doing a lot of and it's doing it in conjunction, for example, with a lot of the universities right now, where you're looking at ground cover data, you're looking at groundwater data. So they're looking at satellite imagery, building AI models on that, and looking at how these things are varying, right? Varying over season, varying over time, right? So then some of this information then becomes important to keep over a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. So it really depends both in enterprise and government setting. You have to know what the outcome is that you're trying to drive, and hence determine what you store and what you don't store.
Okay, thank you. I think it may be appropriate to say we still have to see how to get that part of the intelligence into the system so that it can automatically decide what to keep and what not to keep. Right absolutely, now, that is being done by humans.
If I could just add, I saw Mr. Murali is also part of HBR, and I remember, one of the conversations that I was having with the Harvard University, the chief librarian. Yeah. And, one of the discussion points was digital libraries, digital books. And if you see, we have certain, when data was limited and information was limited, we are seeing certain books that have survived 2000 years, sure. Paper-based. Yes. But digital data is a lot more it's prone to corruption, losses, hacking, so there is a lot more, so the longevity of this digital data is also something to consider.
It's a question mark. That's what you're saying. Okay, thank you. I have several questions from the audience, but what I'll do is I'll have one question which I'll address to Mr. Murali, and then we'll get back to general questions which any of you can answer. Okay, Mr. Murali, there is one question that has come in. Can you highlight what is the present progress in sensors embedded in human body that can interact with smart devices?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right?
Yes, maybe a little closer to them. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Please. All right. There are several developments that are happening in that area.
Can you speak a little louder? I think it's a little, audience may have something.
Okay.
Yeah, better. Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I have to raise my voice a little bit. There are several biosensors development that is happening. What is interesting to note is there are three types of sensors that are there, that are closer to your body, that are on your body, that are inside your body, and their purposes are different. The ones that are closer to your body is used in augmenting the data and providing it for your immersive experience. And the ones that are on the body will measure some of the parameters on your body It could be oxygen level, it could be pressure level, it could be several of the medical parameters that somebody is interested, and it gets integrated into the central medical system. The one inside the body is more, in healthcare, they will split it into three parts: illness, wellness, and lifestyle. So the wellness and the illness, they want to watch you closely. Sometimes they choose to have your sensors inside the body. That is with respect to healthcare. In the industry, there are some equipments known as exoskeletons. They become a part of your body. It is external to your body. For example, you could be paraplegic or a backbone kind of structure. Then you are able to lift much more weight for industrial purposes. Things like that happening because in the workshop environment, in the industry environment, you may have to lift a lot more weight. A cobot may help you, but still you need to manage that. So solutions like that are also there. There are several application areas are possible in that. You have to pay attention to near your body, on your body, and inside your body. Inside your body is making several progress in surgery as well. I hope I answered the question.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Now I come to some general questions. I believe, Mr. Murali, I believe you have a cutoff time at, I think, around 4:10 or so. Is it? What 4:30? Is it?
4:30. If I can sign up, it will be useful for me.
Yeah. Okay. We'll try to see how to close it in the time. I'll try to take a few of these questions and let us see where we can go from there. Okay. Maybe let me do one thing. I'll see. There is a question on, is there any chemical sensor to intimate an alert for a chemical accident? Like the one in Visakhapatnam and long ago in Bhopal and now in Beirut as well, so that we can avoid some of these accidents. That's a question one participant has posted. Any comment on that? I think any of the panelists can answer, whoever wants to, not a problem.
May I take one? Yeah. So chemical is it's a little bit of a deeper science problem. So if it is Bhopal, you have to closely relate it to the gas leak problem, right? So there are sensors that can detect nowadays. Back in those days, Bhopal would have been very tough, but nowadays it's very easy. Sensors are much better. If you understand the chemical part of potential leaks or accident, you may be able to systematically design and alert people very effectively. For example, you may have to run a pilot if you, let's say you want to design a system for nuclear accidents, then you need to understand it better and then identify it. You can use some of those AI/ML techniques for predictive analytics or any of the models that you develop for identifying these accidents. You can use AR, VR to even simulate one and figure out what you need to do later on. So all this is possible these days. It was a little bit harder in the earlier days.
I think, thank you, Mr. Murali. I think one other point I'd like to add is, unfortunately, some of these catastrophes have happened in Bhopal, for example, as well as probably in Visakhapatnam, the recent one in Visakhapatnam. I think the gas itself did not have a smell by which they could detect it, in the sense that people are oblivious to the fact that the environment is now contaminated and they have to find some other place. Another, of course, the magnitude of the contamination is so high that nothing much could be done in a reasonable time to prevent the deaths. I think so. Sensors could be there, but I think that needs to be addressed in terms of where it should be located, how many do we put, and so on. Okay, I recall that some time ago I went to this Manuguru, where they have you mentioned nuclear. For nuclear plant, they extract what is called D2O, heavy water. Okay? And for that, they use hydrogen sulfide, H2S, as a medium. Now, H2S is considered to be an extremely poisonous gas. Okay. Now, obviously, what they have to take care of it so quickly that what they have done is in the perimeter of that particular complex, they have put sensors every 30 feet or so. Okay, so obviously that becomes an expensive solution. But obviously, for very sensitive chemicals, some such schemas may need to be done. But again, it's invariably there is a trade-off between cost versus when it can happen. But in terms of life and death situation, of course, any amount of money, somebody might say you have to put it, correct? Provided one sees a problem in that. I think sensors, you're right, Mr. Murli, that sensors, there's a lot of advances that have happened. But again, how to ensure that these schemas are put in place is another big issue. We need to see how to address that. Now, let me pose a few more questions that have come from the audience, right? And then this again, I'll let individuals decide, or maybe based on what I know, I can ask the question. Namely, maybe this is to Mr. Sandeep, okay? Uber is testing flying cars in foreign countries. How far are we from such a future in India? Would you like to take that question, Mr. Sandeep?
Yeah, I think, see, these are, these are all good experimentations, right? So the thing is that, but, whether you talk of flying cars, even there are also in some places, we are looking at already, I think for the last 1.5 years, within a campus, we are having, driverless cars also, right? So these are, good to, for experimentations, or even you can hear that now leveraging drones, you are getting pizza delivered at home, right? These are good news stories, right? Which comes in the media, good to read, good to know. But, trust me, we are all far from it kind of thing, right? So, because, the thing is that, one is, the economies of scale should work, right? So for example, like I was in, Shanghai some 2005 to 2008. Okay. So there, you have, it's still running. It's called maglev, cars. Okay. So where basically the entire train, it runs without wheels, right? And it goes up to, 300, 350, kilometers per hour, right?
Yes.
Now the thing is that it is so costly, kind of thing, right? So it has been kept by the government more as a showcase, right? Otherwise we could have said that, okay, why replace all the things and put a maglev everywhere, because the cost does not support that kind of thing, right? So while it is good to know that cars are flying around, and but I think we have to look at what is the benefit and what is the cost behind that. I think, and then, there comes that whether we have the technology backbone to support that kind of thing as well. So I think yes, to be far.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next question, probably I think I may have Amrita answer that. Okay. Which cities in India are transforming themselves into smart cities?
Okay. So, the government came up with the Smart Cities mission, and through this mission, they had identified like 100 cities which had been invited to submit their smart city plans. Now, what was interesting about it is that for the first time ever in the history of India, like government and cities were looking at city planning in such a cohesive fashion. They were looking at technology inclusion in designing the built infrastructure of the city, and they were looking at a range of solutions which could either cut across different parts of the city, or focused on an area, an intensive set of solutions that could be demonstrated and then taken as a model for expanding within the city itself. Right? So this was about 5 years back. Now, 5 years later, what we see is that obviously, there is, the needle has moved. The needle has moved. On the positive side, there have been whether coming from the smart cities budget, because there's budgetary allocations, right? Like, or coming from the safe city budgets, or like, any other Amrit budget and so on. There's been a set of initiatives looking at, let's say, transportation, and many cities are coming up with their metro rail systems, right? So transport has been a success. If you're looking at from a safe city perspective, some of the safety and security solutions that you look at have been installed in many cities. But at a macro level, if you see, out of the 100, about 80 actually completed plans for which budgets were allocated. Out of those 80, really speaking, about 25 to 30 have taken projects which have gone off the ground.
Okay.
And these are real things that cities can demonstrate and citizens can see. And at least for those cities during lockdown, because they've been able to use the city systems that have been deployed and implemented so far, it's been visibly seen that at least that has been repurposed for emergency response management. Right, so many cities had, for example, an integrated control and command center. They had put in the cameras were there for a safety and surveillance perspective, but they were used for looking at lockdown monitoring. They will social distancing and so on. Several cities had digital health solutions, and again digital kiosks and so on, and these were put to good use. Digital literacy was there as a small component in some cities, so again those were put to good use. Again, looking at a macro level, what's emerging really is that how do you ensure that spending happens, right? You have a budget,
Yes.
but we are seeing that out of the 80 that did get budget, only 25 or 30 were able to implement. We've been associated with multiple cities. So in the plan phase, we worked with 14 cities when we were doing the detailed project report and detailed planning and doing the city level architecture. We worked with 3 cities: Aurangabad, Lucknow, and Agra. And we've been long-term involved with Agra as the program management consultant for implementation. And Agra, pretty much in all the rankings, if you see, just before lockdown, we were number 1 in terms of the quantum of implementation that actually has happened as against plan, right? That had been set out. But in any metric, if you see every few months, the Smart Cities mission and Mahua keeps doing some of these things. So there is a set of 8 or 10 cities that keep coming up, right, from that sense. And some of these names they keep repeating. So you might have a Surat and an Ahmedabad and Agra and a Kanpur, and there's a bunch of cities that keep repeating in these lists. And then there are cities which have not been able to move the needle, right? And the other big thing that emerged out of this was that about 90-95% of the budget really had gone into what is called the hard infrastructure. So roads, solutions that were primarily chosen by different cities based on their priorities, whether they were around traffic or waste management, water management, clean energy, and so on. Less than 5% of the budget was allocated to what is called the softer infrastructure. So if you think about digital health at the national level, the plan only included 1 to 2% of budget allocation for digital health. It only included 1 to 2% of allocation towards digital literacy programs. And in the pandemic, we are realizing that these things are important, right? So as we are looking at the next phase, a few things are happening. The cities that have performed well, they are being cities that have not performed as well, to see if we can move the needle for more cities. And from operationalizing perspective and new budget allocation perspective, this whole idea of health infrastructure, education infrastructure, environment infrastructure, and last mile government to citizen services, right, are becoming important. So if you see in the previous wave of digitalization, and we've seen GST and how every part of the government ecosystem in that domain has become interconnected, but we're looking in that space the citizen or business to government payments, right? We can pay online. But now the next phase is really going to look at government to citizen services and how to ensure and operationalize that, right? Like, so there's, there's good things happening, but we wish it was faster.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we are, running out of time. So though there are a few more questions, it's all right. I think we can wind up now. So I'll try to summarize very, very quickly within a short time so that we can close by 4:30. I think Mr. Murali has a deadline anyway at the time. He has to go for another conference, looks like. Okay. So thanks to all the panelists. I think you have given a good insight and thrown you might say, a lot of light on how to look at some of these, future trends that are happening. More importantly, how technology is shaping our future, how technology is being used to advantage to realize the connected city that we need. I think the pandemic has made all of us realize how important it is for us to get connected to others. And we feel the pinch when we now sit at home, find that we are unable to move where we want and interact with whom we want. I think some of these also need to be addressed. But I think that's several different aspects of technological constraints and requirements have been thrown up from our panelists. I think there's been a good education for the audience, and thanks to all the panelists for their contribution. Thank you. Yeah, we can sign off now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.